All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. The topic today we're going to be going through is crafting your investment strategy with Riskalyze. Riskalyze is a new tool that my team and I are now using to be a little bit more exact and scientific in determining the ideal risk and return trade-off for our clients and our investors. If you're a client already, you might already be familiar with the Riskalyze program. And if you're not, I'm sure we'll discuss it on a future meeting. And for those of you who don't already know me and my team, I'll go through a brief introduction here. So my name is Alex Sierra, and I primarily help educators, public service employees, oh, someone's coming in, public service employees and nonprofits plan to build generational wealth. I'm an expert when it comes to public pension planning, especially the CalSTRS pension, the CalPERS pension, the LACERA pension, and then help a lot around retirement planning around those. So 403B management, IRA management, etc. I'm also a certified financial planner and am part of a team of other financial advisors. So I work with my wife, Tori, who's a partner and financial advisor as well. And then we have our two client service specialists, Brandon and Max, and together as a team of 4 now, we serve over 600 clients primarily in Southern California. So while I work primarily with educators, public employees, and nonprofits, Tori works primarily with small business owners, and Brandon works primarily with young professionals on budgeting and credit card planning. So kind of no matter what your financial planning needs are, our team should have you covered. Our firm, which is called Cetera Investors, connects our team with a network of over 7,000 financial advisors throughout the country. And Cetera Investors allows us to act as independent financial advisors, meaning that we can work with investments and insurance solutions from almost any company out there on the market. After the webinar today, I'll make sure to send all the attendees an email with the slides from today's presentation, as well as my contact information and the link to schedule a virtual meeting with one of the members of our team if you choose to do so. We're not going to be opening up the webinar to questions today, but if you do have questions, you can use that follow-up email as an open line of communication. So you can just reply directly to that email. If you have questions, concerns, comments, feedback, we welcome all of it. So without further ado, we will start our conversation about risk. So let's talk about risk. Now is definitely an interesting time to be talking about risk. We've really seen both sides of the risk and reward trade-off over the last 3 years. So as most of you know, 2020 and 2021 were both pretty strong years for the market. So that's where we kind of saw the reward side of that risk reward trade-off. However, 2022, where the S&P 500 was down almost 20%, showed us a little bit about the risk side of that trade-off. So, just in the very recent future, we've seen kind of both sides of the equation there. And yeah, after years like last year, where the market was down almost 20%, caused a lot of people to rethink their attitude towards risk and relook at their desired risk and return trade-off. So when it comes to determining your risk and return trade-off, there's a lot of ways to do that, but if you've ever worked with a financial advisor before, the classic financial advisor will use a risk questionnaire to find out your tolerance for risk. And to be honest, these risk questionnaires, I'd say, typically miss the mark. They're usually a series of very general multiple choice questions that are given to all clients, regardless of age and time horizon. So while they can still spit out somewhat of an idea of your desired risk return trade-off, it's not a very exact science there. So typically with that kind of classic advisor model, you would take the risk questionnaire, and then based off of your answers, you would either be considered conservative, moderate, or aggressive. So if you've invested before, you've probably heard these terms. Maybe you've also heard moderately conservative or moderately aggressive as kind of like those in-between areas there. But in my opinion, these kind of old ways of stereotyping investors with just kind of these simple words simply doesn't work anymore, not exact enough. Why? I mean, maybe what I consider conservative, you might consider moderate. maybe the term moderately aggressive means something completely different to me than it does to you, right? They're different words. There's not a lot of numbers behind them. One advisor might think one portfolio is moderate that another advisor might think is aggressive. So not super exact in that way. Another classic way that advisors tend to stereotype is by age, right? So the classic stereotype would be that a young investor, so somebody maybe in their 20s or 30s, is aggressive, right? They're aggressive because they're young, they have lots of time on their side, that would seem to make sense. But in fact, a recent study actually showed that 52% of people ages 20 to 29 do not consider themselves aggressive, which might be somewhat surprising, but just shows that the stereotyping by age doesn't really, work. And kind of on the flip side, we typically think of people who are already retired, maybe in their 70s, to be more conservative investors. They need their money sooner, therefore they should be more conservative. However, that same study showed that 53% of people ages 70 through 79 do not consider themselves conservative. So just kind of shows you that we can't really rely on such simple semantics and stereotypes to really get a good idea of a client's desired risk and reward trade-off. So what's the alternative? The alternative that we are using now is something called the risk score, right? And this is part of Riskalyze's program, but the risk score is a Nobel Prize winning framework that's used to pinpoint exactly how much risk you're willing to take on for the potential gains of your investment. So your risk number is going to be a score between 1 and 99. An example of somebody who had a risk number of 1 might be somebody who doesn't want their money to go up and down at all, so they only invest in cash. Maybe they primarily are using banking vehicles, etc. And the example of someone who might have a risk number of 99 might be somebody who's very aggressive, likes taking a gamble, and might invest in really speculative investments like cryptocurrencies, small cap stocks, that type of stuff. So typically no one is going to fall into the extremes of either 1 or 99. Most investors are going to fall somewhere in the middle. One other thing I like about the risk number is that there are 99 different possibilities of results, right? So you could take the Riskalyze questionnaire and there's 99 different numbers that you can be assigned, where if we're talking about the classic risk questionnaires, they're usually going to just give you either a moderately aggressive, conservative, and there's really only 5 sets of investors to choose from, right? Ranging from conservative all the way to aggressive. So I think that the risk number with 99 different potential possibilities allows us to be more exact than just relying on those 5 terms, conservative, moderate, aggressive, and everything in between. So next question you might ask is, what is your risk score? So we'll start to kind of go through our process of assessing risk using Riskalyze and then using that info to put together ideal portfolios for our clients. So first, step 1 is to determine how much risk do you want? And really the answer to that question is just going to be your risk number. So step 1 is to pinpoint your personal risk number. To do this, you'll take a short online risk questionnaire. This risk questionnaire, just to note, isn't like the old-fashioned risk questionnaire that we've used in the past with mostly qualitative multiple choice questions. Instead, this risk questionnaire will walk you through a series of potential risk and return trade-offs, right? And then it will get your feedback on how you feel about those trade-offs, and then it will test your resoluteness in your decision. Another cool benefit with this questionnaire is it will actually use your actual portfolio value to help you visualize these trade-offs. So instead of relying just on percentages alone, right, it will actually also give you a dollar value that is based off of your actual portfolio. So really you can see the risk and return trade-off decisions that you're presented with. So one example of how the risk questionnaire might go, a question it might ask, could be a question like this. So over the next 6 months, are you willing to risk 10% or $10,000 for the chance to gain 10% or $10,000, right? And just a note there, this would be an example of someone with a portfolio size of $100,000 because 10% of 100,000 is 10,000. So again, are you willing to risk 10% or $10,000 for the chance to gain 10% or $10,000? Then based off of your answer, it might ask you some kind of alternative scenarios to see if you would improve your portfolio by decreasing risk and keeping the same return, or instead keeping the same return and or keeping the same risk and increasing your return potential. So it kind of allows you to now adjust the choice and see how you would improve it. After only a few questions, the Riskalyze analysis will spit out your risk number. So again, this is a quiz that takes usually less than 5 minutes, but even in its shortness of time, I think it still does a much better job than some of the qualitative risk questionnaires that advisors have used in the past. So again, finding your personalized risk number will answer the question of how much risk do you want. Next question to ask yourself is how much risk do you already have? So this is basically looking at your current portfolios and seeing what risk number what risk number is associated with your investment portfolios. So if you're a client, we already have all of your portfolio information and can easily input all of that into the Riskalyze analysis, and Riskalyze will tell us what the risk number for your portfolio is. Then we would compare the risk number of your portfolio to your personal risk number, and that would lead us into a conversation. We found that sometimes your portfolio risk number matches up perfectly with your personal risk number. However, sometimes your portfolio might have a drastically different risk number than your personal risk number, and that would potentially prompt us to make adjustments after a conversation to see if it makes sense. For those of you who aren't already clients, we can usually find out the risk number for your portfolio as long as we know your account holdings. So you can usually find your account holdings online or on your most recent investment account statement. Send that over to us. We can run that into the Riskalyze analysis and we can see what risk number is associated with your portfolio. So again, how much risk do you have? That's looking at the risk number associated with your portfolios. Next question to answer is how much risk should you have? So once we have your risk number and we start to understand your goals, we can now put together an optimized portfolio that fits you. So this doesn't always mean lining up your risk number and portfolio risk exactly. Sometimes, in fact, your optimal portfolio is going to be more of a compromise between your personal risk number and maybe the time horizon for your goal. So I'll give you a couple examples of that. An example of maybe a young investor, so somebody in their 20s that is saving for retirement in their 60s. If they went through the Riskalyze analysis and their risk number came out really low, so maybe in the 20s or 30s, but we are putting together a portfolio for their retirement, which is 40 years away, we might kind of compromise between their personal risk number, which came out low, and their long time horizon, which indicates that they should be a little bit more aggressive with their investments because they have so much time on their side and can easily ride out the ups and downs of the market. So, maybe that person isn't going to be in a portfolio with a risk number of, 99, but maybe somewhere in the middle between their low score and where they probably should be based off of their age. So maybe somewhere in the 50s, 60s for an investor like that. Another example might be an aggressive person who has a short-term savings goal. So for example, if I am an aggressive investor, I take the Riskalyze assessment, it comes out in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, that makes me an aggressive investor. However, if I'm saving for a home next year, that doesn't mean that I should invest that money in an aggressive stock portfolio. Just wouldn't make sense for the time horizon of that goal, right? Because if the market didn't do well, over the next year, I would have to liquidate at a loss to buy my home. And then what's the point in investing in the first place if we have to liquidate at a loss, right? So for that aggressive investor, even though they might have a high risk number for a short-term savings goal. That portfolio might, want to have a lower risk number, maybe not a 0 because that client is willing to take on a little bit of risk, but maybe a compromise, something in the 30s, 40s, something along those lines. So again, your risk number doesn't have to necessarily match up perfectly with the risk number that is associated with your portfolio. Another cool thing about the Riskalyze analysis is that we can stress test your results. So of course, as we know, the world is very unpredictable. So it's impossible to predict with 100% certainty what your portfolio outcomes will be. But Riskalyze does predict a range of outcomes over the next 6 months with a 95% certainty using some statistical and historical analysis. So in this slide here, you can see in the top right, the 95% probability range. So this portfolio, which has a risk number of 25, which I would say is on the lower side, is expected to have a return over the next 6 months between negative 2.79% and positive 6.84% with 95% certainty. So Riskalyze is telling us that 95% of the time over the next 6 months, the portfolio will perform somewhere in that range. But that again only accounts for 95% of the scenarios out there. The Riskalyze also allows you to stress test for some of those more extreme scenarios. So like, for example, the 2008 bear market financial crisis, you can actually see how your portfolio would have performed in extreme cases like that, right? So it's kind of nice, COVID is another one that we went through recently. You might want to see how your portfolio would have performed, during March of 2020 when COVID first hit. So it gives you an idea of what the potential worst case scenarios are with your portfolio, which, hopefully if you can plan for the worst, everything else is going to look better than expected after that. So again, if you want us to stress test your portfolio, that's something that Riskalyze can help us do as well. Next question to answer is, how much risk do you need? So our team spends a lot of time helping with retirement planning. So actually the primary financial planning tool we use for retirement is Money Guide Pro. So many of our clients might be familiar with that name, but Riskalyze also has a nice and simple retirement planning tool. This tool allows you to plug in your retirement age goal, your current investment amount, and your future savings. And then with those inputs, it can return your probability of success. So that's like how likely you're going to be able to retire at your desired age, given all of those inputs. And this can kind of help help us as advisors kind of look at our clients' plan and really understand the time horizon of all of their goals, all of their investment portfolios. And so usually with a combination of their retirement plan or their financial plan and their risk number, the combination of those will allow us to develop an optimal portfolio for our clients there. So that pretty much covers it today for our discussion on risk and the introduction to Riskalyze. Our team started using Riskalyze during 2022, so it's still somewhat new, but we're really excited to make it an even bigger part of our client experience in 2023. I think that this upgrade will make us better advisors in a sense, because we can now be more exact and more scientific when discussing the risk and return trade-off that comes with investing. And I think therefore it should lead to even more optimal portfolios for our current clients and our future clients as well. For those of you listening, I definitely suggest taking the risk number questionnaire to get your personalized risk number. Then you can utilize our team to run the risk number analysis on your portfolio for you. And then once we have those two numbers, we can set up a time to discuss if we need to make any changes, make any adjustments, or if we are just doubling down with our current portfolio. We'll be sending a follow-up email in the next couple of days, and in there, I'll include the slides that we went through today and the link to take the risk number questionnaire so that you can go ahead on your own time, take that 5-minute questionnaire. And then, of course, I'll include the link to meet with me or your current financial advisor to kind of discuss these results. We welcome any questions, comments, and feedback. And you can kind of use that follow-up email that we're sending out as an open line of communication to myself and my team. So on behalf of Tori, Brandon, Max, and myself, wanted to thank you all for taking some time out of your busy days